Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad that you could join us for the very first session of our Rooted in Resilience live Q&A series, especially as we celebrate Earth Month together. Today's session, Strengthening Caribbean Communities for a Changing Climate, gives you a special look behind the scenes at what it really takes to turn bold climate policies into real action on the ground, and so in some of the world's most vulnerable yet resilient regions. At CCAP, we're passionate about building partnerships that drive lasting change through advocacy, education, and innovative projects that tackle urgent issues like methane emissions and sustainable waste management. You'll hear directly from inspiring leaders in the Bahamas, Grenada, and Saint Lucia who are making a difference every day. We hope this session not only gives you insight into our work, but also sparks ideas about how you might get involved in supporting climate action in the Caribbean and beyond. Thank you so much for being here, and let's dive in. Before I introduce our guests, a bit of housekeeping. We will be recording this session, and it will be available after on our channels, both social media and our website. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I will keep an eye out for them and ask our guests throughout the session. Okay, I'm very excited to introduce our guests today. First, we have Saskia Connery. She is an ocean advocate, philanthropist, and entrepreneur with a deep-rooted passion for the Caribbean, particularly the Bahamas. As the Special Projects Officer at the Sean Connery Foundation, she leads initiatives focused on ocean conservation and coral reef restoration. An avid diver, Saskia spends a significant portion of the year in the Bahamas, engaging in activities like snorkeling and diving. Her connection to the ocean is not only recreational, but also philanthropic, as she actively supports environmental and youth organizations. In addition to her environmental efforts, Saskia is the founder of Saga Swim, a swimwear line launched in 2023 with the mission to empower women to feel confident and beautiful on the beach. Her lifestyle and work reflect a harmonious blend of fashion, environmental advocacy, and a deep appreciation for the Caribbean's natural beauty. Saskia, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Next, we have Radisha Reed. Radisha is a sustainability consultant with nearly 20 years of experience in waste management, circular economy, and environmental conservation. She's led numerous high-impact projects throughout the Caribbean region, training over 6,000 professionals in the area of climate and resiliency. She works at the intersection of business, communities, and policy to create systems that boost growth, ensure compliance, and drive real change. Radisha is currently the local consultant for the Recycle Organics program in Saint Lucia. Radisha, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
And finally, we have Hayden Redhead. Hayden has been an environmental and biodiversity activist for over 30 years, with hands-on experience in everything from ecosystem services and marine pollution to composting and wild medicinal herbs. He's led Grenada's first climate strike and is a passionate voice for stronger education and enforcement around protecting nature. Hayden also works closely with local schools and hosts field trips at the Redhead Homestead to inspire the next generation. He is currently our consultant for the Recycle Organics program in Grenada. Welcome, and thank you all for joining us today. So I'd like to start with you, Saskia. As someone who's witnessed firsthand how beaches, reefs, and oceans have changed over the past 25 years, how has this personal perspective shaped your approach to supporting grassroots climate resilience, especially in vulnerable coastal communities like those in the Caribbean?
Saskia, you're muted.
I'm sorry, got it. That's a great question. Thank you. I think the biggest change I've really seen has actually been in the corals as well as the wildlife. And on a positive note, I think that in unity when there is one big issue that is completely tackled. I'm sure everyone remembers about 20 years ago, it was very save the sea turtles, and people were nurturing them, and they were being very, very protected. And I remember when I was a kid going out diving with my father, we would be like, oh my goodness, we saw one sea turtle in 6 months. And now, you know, just walking the beach in the morning, you see them. So that is a great example of how with unity there is immense change. But definitely the corals have declined between different diseases, more cruise ships, more tourists, people not knowing enough and caring less, has definitely affected the reefs. Just local places that I would go diving from even 10 and 5 years ago, I see an absolute massive difference. And that's definitely something that is emotional. You know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the bleaching was so bad that at a point, me and my family who go spearfishing on a daily basis, in the summer, we were kind of just saying, I don't want to go, almost don't want to go diving because it's so sad. But again, going back to the sea turtles, is I think there's so much hope there, because with awareness and with campaigns, especially creative campaigns, to be able to make more people aware, especially with the rise of social media being such a powerhouse in making people aware of different various issues that are very prominent. I think that with enough funding and unity between government and local communities and funders, I really do think that it is possible to create that change. And hopefully in 20 years, you have this conversation and you talk about the declining corals and how they're being restored now, and how that is going to make a very big lasting change. So that's the hope.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think that's absolutely right. You know, we're definitely seeing the effects, right, of raising temperatures, the coral bleaching, but also how raising awareness, right, can absolutely get people to understand the issue and act immediately.
Definitely, if people aren't aware of the issue and how important it is, and it's not just, you know, for snorkelers, but it's, you know, for hurricane protection, also for money for local communities, for tourism, and the ecology of just the ocean and the ocean life and the fish. It's really the home, you know, when you had, as well, at the same time as save the sea turtles, you have to save the rainforest, and look how well they've done now. It's just so much easier for something on land for it to click in people's minds, like, okay, yes, that is oxygen with trees, but at the same time, 49% of our oxygen is coming from the ocean, and most of that is coming from coral reefs as well as algae and other things. But not a lot of people know that. So then again, it's really going back to the whole awareness part and really gaining people's attention and trying to make a lasting difference through unity.
Absolutely. And I really liked what you were saying about like the tourism sector, right? It's such a huge sector in a lot of these islands, right, across the whole region, and bringing in the private sector, right? And really also building that awareness and engagement there, I think could be, you know, something important that we could kind of tap into. Maybe I just want to ask, you know, turn to Rhodesia really quick. You know, your work in St. Lucia focuses a lot on organic waste. Why is that important to climate mitigation and resilience?
Thank you for the question, Allison. Well, my work in St. Lucia, as you stated, focuses on organic waste, but not just organic waste, but a plethora of sustainability practices. But organic waste is the most immediate and impactful way to address climate mitigation and resilience. Organic waste, when improperly managed, as we know, releases methane, which is a potent greenhouse gas. By improving how we handle this waste, we significantly reduce the emissions while also creating opportunities for composting and soil health, which support climate adaptation. In St. Lucia, I've worked with a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders, hotels, the Solid Waste Management Authority, communities, and NGOs to promote sustainability on a whole and the practices of that. The government, though, is taking an important step, which include drafting of probably new waste-related policies. But what I've found is that policy alone isn't enough. There needs to be active engagement with the private sector, especially tourism. As we know, Saint Lucia is the world's destination for honeymooners. So we get a lot of persons who are coming to our shores. So hotels, we found, are the largest generator of organic waste and often are part of an international brand. So within St. Lucia, we have many international brands, and those international brands have sustainability commitments outside of St. Lucia. So they have both the motivation and the resources to lead this shift. So when they do this, I find that it creates a ripple effect throughout the chain of supply within the local communities, because you have persons who work within these organizations, then take it to their communities, and you have that ripple effect. There is a real opportunity here for climate action, and I honestly believe that organic waste is a powerful starting point, because in my opinion, it's the cheapest way to go, and it's so easy to start.
Yes, absolutely. And it starts with behavior change, right? These are not huge technologies. This is not something that's complicated, right? It's just building awareness, right? And getting that behavior change, but you need it at the individual level, right? Every person to understand why it's important and make that change.
Completely agree with that. What we've also found is that changing behavior is not very easy, but once you remain consistent, it does happen.
Absolutely.
I think you made a great point about the hotels and these companies in these luxurious areas having these programs. In the Bahamas, for example, Sandals has one close to Lend a Hand, Bahamas, which is the organization I'm on the board with. And I think that people being hands-on and really having that one-on-one experience with seeing with their own eyes, with their own hands, the beauty, but also the destruction that it can cause when it's not managed in the proper way, really empowers them to really want to be more aware and make a difference and go home and tell their friends about it, which is why I think that storytelling in climate activism is so crucial. Because if you see some of the most successful organizations in climate activism, they're the ones with the biggest following. There's the ones who have done the highest kind of content creation and kind of videos, and really, even if you can't be there, going with someone from the beach and doing the cleanup and doing all the things that they're doing for their hotel guests, but being able to film it and share it with the world.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. I also, it makes me kind of, think about, as we think about the tourism sector, as we, bring in the private sector, I think there's probably also some, like, within, a lot of knowledge, right? And kind of within the culture and local knowledge as well. Hayden, how can traditional and Indigenous knowledge be featured in building climate resilience?
Great question, and thanks for bringing it into focus. I first want to just touch on quickly one of the things that Saskia just mentioned, and it's storytelling. Because a lot of Indigenous and traditional knowledge is currently held as stories of our older folks, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and the leaders in our communities hold the knowledge within the traditional and the Indigenous space. First, to say that resilience is built into most traditional and Indigenous knowledge. Things like, as an example, that would be considered under climate resilience: rainwater harvesting, composting, regenerative agriculture, protecting biodiversity, and particularly responsible exploitation of natural resources. We see and hear stories all the time about Indigenous people and the people who came before us being better stewards of our environment and natural resources than we have been and continue to be. As an advocate, I am an advocate for preserving traditional and indigenous knowledge. And from a historic perspective, they contain a lot of practical and logical practices that can assist us in building our resilience. While climate change and indeed climate resilience may appear to be new concepts, they are absolutely not. Traditional and indigenous knowledge recognizes things like ecosystem services, where nature itself provides these what are considered provisioning, providing food, regulating the atmosphere, and supporting services. Things we enjoy, like Saskia mentioned, diving. The beauty of the nature is preserved in itself by nature. We just need to allow it to happen. One of the things we have seen is, COVID-19. Again, it's mentioned that we saw changes take place when we all had to go back inside. Positive impacts. Here in Grenada, we saw species that we had not seen for decades reappear. So I think a lot of what we need to do now is to pay attention to traditional knowledge and to indigenous knowledge by using technology, but using this information that is out there, coupled with technology, to come up with innovative new solutions under the banner of climate resilience. I think that's saying a lot, but we need to recognize, as I said, the impact of ecosystem services, what are provided by, the wetlands. Both Saskia and Radisha mentioned the tourism industry. We need to work collaboratively with these tourism and industry to ensure that we have planned development, as I put it, development by design, and not development solely on location, jobs, but a more holistic approach to development that encapsulates the protection of our environment, the restoration of our environment, and maintaining the positive impacts and positive traditions. Thank you.
Hayden, I love that, a holistic approach with intentionality in how we move forward in our progress. So I hear we have a lot of knowledge within our communities. We have resources available in the private sector. How do we kind of codify that, right? How do we pass that on to the next generation? Radisha, how are youth and communities being engaged in St. Lucia's climate response?
So in St. Lucia here, there are climate resilience and the youth and community are very hard in one, because awareness for us is the first step towards any meaningful, long-lasting action. And as you said, in order for you spoke about the having it continue. So we work with schools, community groups, and young leaders because we want to see a real shift in the behaviors and the mindset. So one of the youth groups that actually is very active is the CYEN, which is Caribbean Youth Environment Network for the Saint Lucia chapter. And they have been tremendously instrumental in mobilizing young people. They have a cabinet, they do what is necessary to create climate advocacy, education, and getting into some of these grassroots initiatives. They touch mangrove restoration, environmental educational campaigns. They do a lot of cleanup. So it is evident that within our youth and within schools, that there is some sort of educational sustainability education within that aspect. So there is longevity and continuity. Within the school sector as well, there are environmental clubs that are within these schools that do their composting, they do waste separation drives. When it's these environmental days within the year, you see where the youths are out there before their parents or before adults. So we see that the next generation, they want a better environment to live in. They are empowered youth, and we empower them to take ownership, because we are protecting their future and they need to put a hand in that. So they're very active here, and they are equipped with the voices, as I will always, when I speak to them, I let them know your voice makes a lot of noise. So make the noise and make it right. People listen to you, because when you start to talk about your future, and you are the future leaders. So I think within Saint Lucia, they're very active, and that is very bolstering and motivating for someone like me who have a next 30, 40 years to go, but to see that the persons that are younger than I am are actively being a part of it. I didn't get that experience when I was younger because I didn't know about climate change, and I didn't care, to be honest. But now that I'm older, I recognize the importance, and I'm happy that the youths are actually taking this on.
Absolutely. Thank you. I love it. Hayden, maybe in Grenada, are you seeing the same enthusiasm and activism in Grenada?
Most definitely. But first, I wanted to thank Rhodesia, because I may not have 30 or 40 years left, but I'm happy to know you're coming up behind and supporting. I want to start by saying, have you ever, or anyone on the call or listening, taken a group of 6 or 7-year-olds out into the field on a field trip or on a project? The volume, the questions, the inquisitiveness, that in that moment, we all can appreciate therein lies the opportunity. Therein lies the opportunity to create to support their learning and to direct them to the positive practices. In Grenada, we've been doing just like Rhodesia said, lots of work with the different groups in the schools, but it has been very well documented as best practice when seeking mainstream changes to behaviors. You start with the youth. In their own words, they consider themselves to be woke. That's the older ones, the teens and the 20s. Or as you may say, for us, they're awake. And they are actively seeking outlets for expression and creativity. It's up to us to give them those outlets. And as Rhodesia said, support their voices. Tell them you have the voice, use it. I mean, we consistently hear the stories now of the children, the students going home, even after one session of learning, and having a direct impact on their households, on their communities, even insisting and admonishing their parents and their family members to comply with some of the new codes and the new learning. The persons involved, the Grenada Green Group, involved in the plastic pollution processes and the collecting of the single-use plastic bottles, will tell lots of stories they hear from parents of the kids now coming home after having learned about the recycling, insisting that it be done. The same opportunity presents itself with organic waste. With the kids, they love it, getting outside and learning. So part of our program under the home composting program of the Recycle Organics program, we encourage the persons during our training sessions to make the composting a family affair. Bring the kids together. When you're going out to the compost bin, when you're collecting the compost scraps in the kitchen, ensure that the kids are involved, ensure they understand the process, ensure they are part of the process of harvesting the compost, ensure that they are part of using it in the garden, and you can explain the impact it's having on the plants. Not most kids, maybe not so many of the more princess type girls, love to get dirty outside in the yard. They love to get involved with the plants, with the soil, with the earth. My encouragement is get the kids involved, get them actually working with the soil and compost itself. I think the opportunity is huge. I think CYEN, other youth groups, through projects like Recycle Organics in the region, we have a huge opportunity to impact the youth and they in turn will impact families, communities, and on the national scale.
I just wanna jump in right here to say, I have had an example of the same thing you're saying with the children. I implemented a composting site at one of our recent school here, and the oldest is probably 11, and on each visit that I have back to the school to check up on what's happening, they're telling me, Miss Rhodesha, my mommy, I told her not to put the banana skin in the garbage, to put it in the compost bin because we're composting, and daddy puts so it's there. It's the marketing that we have to use. They're inspirational. They are excited about the project. So whatever it is that we teach them and let them be. They will do all the work for you. So they're very influential when it comes to parents. And I think where sustainability is concerned, that's where we should start. Tap into those kids and let them influence their parents to make a change.
Yes, I love that. I've seen it in my own household as well. My son, he says, oh, I'm gonna put in the compost, right? He peels his mandarin and he runs and he puts his peels in the compost, and right, he gets like an excitement from that, right? They love to help at that, and when they're young, and so it's beautiful. And these are great examples at the local level, and I really like this. Maybe just kind of looking out, maybe a little bit more globally. Saskia, you have this great platform that you're using to raise awareness in the Caribbean, region, kind of broadly, but and specifically in the Bahamas. What changes that you'd like to see from your activism?
I think all of this is so important, but at the end of the day, the lasting change comes from consistency, and so much of the consistency comes from legislation and lawmaking, and everyone saying, oh, well, this is a breeding ground, so I'm not going to leave this and that there on a local level, but it's not by law. So people that visit, people that are tourists, there's no awareness about that, excuse me. And I think that legislation is so important, and that's the trickiest part, right? And that's globally, and working closely with different NGOs in the Bahamas, and I'm sure it's the same worldwide, as I have seen that a lot of the funds that are given, that should be given towards people who are working at the NGOs so they can maintain their livelihood, and towards gas for the boats to get to the remote areas that they need, and special cameras and equipment are used to get research scientist licenses, and change like legislation within the government. And I would really love to see on a worldwide level and in Caribbean level in the Bahamas, that want really coming inside of the people who are really going to be able to have the power to incorporate those rules to make them permanent to being lasting change. For example, if composting became like recycling, and it was like, no, you have to compost. We're at a restaurant, it's by law, now everyone has to compost. So it's obviously going to start at the youth level with everyone being more aware and making parents aware. And this is how it was when I was growing up. Recycling was the new thing, and I was like, oh no, mom, you have to put the paper in the recycling bin. And she was like, what? It's just garbage. And now recycling is mandatory, like worldwide. And that's what I really mean about unity and awareness globally, and that being something that is very easily spread by content and storytelling, which Hayden was very well in saying. It's all coming from old traditions, and it's very ancestral. And I'm sure they did so much composting, they didn't have these chemicals that they put in the ground to make things grow more. They would put natural resources. And I think it's very fine line between using technology for the good and the bad, being able to use the old techniques that are still very useful and kind of more inexpensive and easier, rather than using the technology and the access to science that we do today to create chemicals just to make things easier that are actually having a harmful sense on the sustainability of our world and of our oceans.
Yes, thank you. I want to just turn quickly. We have a few questions here in the Q&A, so thank you for that. Luz Ledesma has asked, how might tourism both help and hurt climate resilient goals? Excellent question. Yes, who would like to answer?
Could you repeat the question again for me?
Yes, no problem.
Allison?
How might tourism both help and hurt climate resilient goals?
So I think I can answer that question. So as you know, the influx of tourists to a particular area can damage whatever area that it is in. However, so there's one aspect. If you don't care for what you have, it will be destroyed. It's a matter of maintaining what you have, and the island and the islands and everywhere is there to be enjoyed, but enjoyed safely. So what I see happening with a lot of hotels, they're trying to become climate friendly. They're trying to put sustainability practices in place to reduce the impact that it has on the environment. So whereas previously, as Saskia said, no one really bothered about turtles. But now you have hotels who have turtle restoration projects where they cordon off turtle nesting areas or nesting sites. And when those hatchlings come in, they allow those hatchlings to go out. And the tourists themselves would then either donate to a foundation like Sandals Foundation, who gives back to those organizations, who give back to the community. And you see that there is, whilst we are using the resources, the natural resources, there are companies who are actually adding and trying to sustain and trying to make it more resilient for our future generation. So my thing is to use the resources, the natural resources that we have, again, just to say sustainably, safely, use it, but don't abuse it. So I think that's how I can answer that question for you.
That's a really great point about, how tourism is bringing in money into the economy, but then, having that money into the economy being re-put into keeping the sustainability active rather than holding on to it and doing other things with that money. So that's a really great, interesting point, Radisha.
Excellent. Luz also has a follow-up question. And I might send this over to Hayden if I may. What are the challenges of implementing home composting or school composting programs? How can we transform organic waste into something sexy and attractive? Oh.
Okay. So the first part of the question is easy. The second part's a nightmare because organic waste is smelly and gross, but I have an idea for that as well. So the challenges are similar to things discussed already here today. For example, funding. It's always going to have funding. It's a logistical nightmare because you're dealing with kids in different schools that have different administrators. You're dealing with the government because you have schools that you have to have permission to do it. It has to fit within the curriculum, within the programs. So it has a lot to do with planning, coordination, funding, and commitment. That commitment needs to lead to certain levels of consistency, also mentioned here on the call today. You have to have consistency throughout the programs that you use, but consistency from term to term, to class to class. So sometimes a program comes into play, the compost bin is created, they start planting a garden, and then it all falls by the wayside. So only some students for a limited part of time get the benefit. So these things have to be set in the schools. The clubs have to be established but consistently maintained through the commitment of the administrators. The second part, the sexy, as I said, I was at a pollution plastics meeting and they were talking about that aspect of it. And there I am in the room thinking about a landfill and I'm the funky smelling part of that plant. However, I think we need to focus, we did speak about it as well, on the end goal. So show the kids the result of using the compost. The vegetables, let them see the beautiful plants, the vegetables, the flowers, the produce. Let them see the income potential from the produce. Let them see that this is an alternative to imports. They're just as tasty or more tasty. Explain to them the health benefits of using food grown with compost support. So I think it has to do with the imagery, the support, and again, back to the storytelling. Make sure the kids, as part of the program itself, not casual, it has to form part of the program, understand the end result of the composting. But where does it come from? Then you can backtrack and show the organic waste produces this compost that then produces these benefits.
Might I just add two things to your point there, Hayden? So one of the challenges that I found within the school is that time when there is actually no school. It will bolster between September and, let's say, the first week in December. But that period of time where there is no school, there's a challenge because there's no consistency. There's no resources to keep that composting and even the garden going. So that is something in terms of creating consistency. They need the resources to keep it going because at that time, persons go on vacation, there's no replacement, the children are not there to turn the compost or even to use the compost. So resources needs to be in order for it to be consistent. And another thing that I found, Amy, you said about the results that happen from the fruits as well. I would like to also add the journey. So what I find, kids are very enthused about the journey from a seedling to the actual bearing of the fruits, to harvesting those fruits. So the journey from start to finish is something that I think a lot more attention needs to be placed on so they can be a part of that journey. There can be some sort of ownership as it relates to, this is my seedling and this is my fruit, and how they use compost to be a part of that project. So I hope that adds to your answer as well, Hayden.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. And going back to, I think, one of the first questions you asked me, and we were speaking about storytelling and content and social media and visuals, I think a great way to spread awareness and have unity on that is being able to capture a seedling into its final product and what it will produce, because being able to tell that story through all the seasons and all the changes, and that is the thing that, you know, if you can put that into a 1-minute clip and everyone can see it, they'll be like, wow, because then you don't have to be, you know, a 12-year-old in science class seeing it. You're seeing it daily, or you're being sent it, and it can be very impactful to see. When I made that comparison of composting and recycling when I was a child, I remember in school, that's how we were learning about recycling. I even remember the exact clip. It was like Coca-Cola cans going through a machine and it was coming out as something completely different. And I was like, wow, that is so cool. And then I went home and I was like, Mom, no, you can't put that glass. You have to put the glass bottle of orange juice somewhere else because it's going to go through a machine. It's going to be magic, you know? So being able to have that kind of visual as well, I think is very important. So also trying to involve a lot of creatives, I think, in climate activism is incredibly important for that reason, because I feel like that's a very easy way for people to take in information and for it to visually stay in their brain and resonate truly on a different level with them.
Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. I also have this great comment here. excuse me, from Robert Griesbach. A short tour of the typical landfill will cause most of the participants to start collecting and composting their organic waste if they're shown how to compost. I love that, Robert. Thank you. That is so true. Yeah, we don't think about where our trash goes, right? You throw it in the bin and then it's gone, right? The trash people come, right? And then you never see it again. But I think seeing the effect, right, of all of that trash together and how it's managed and what happens to it, right? It goes back to that conversation of understanding the full cycle, right? And things don't just disappear in this world. Like we either reuse them, right? We turn it into compost, we turn it into recycling, or it just, sits and becomes waste. So perfect. Thank you. I love that. Maria Paula Viscardo, if you could implement one bold climate action in your country or in the Caribbean at large today, what would it be?
I think I'll go first. I don't want Hayden to take mine.
Okay, I'll be the sacrificial lamb.
So I'll go first.
Okay.
It was just Easter, so it's like very on brand.
Just one. Every country must have waste separation at source, at household, must across the Caribbean. If we do that, the impact that we will have would be beyond this world. Every country within the Caribbean, separation at source, funded by the government, give us all the colored bins that we need. Sure, let's do it.
All right.
Yes,
So
the easier you make it for people, the more often they're going to use it, right?
good
Great.
one, Radisha. Mine is a little more controversial. One action throughout the Caribbean, very impactful, is a program that would result in more sustainable, resilient, aware government officials, lawmakers. I find that if our leaders and those in the positions to create the laws, create the legislation that creates the enabling environment and enforcement, if they become acutely aware, as we are asking our children to do, as we ourselves are seeking to do, if they become acutely aware of the issue itself, the consequences, the potential benefits, and the long-term vision, I think we would be in a good position to build all the things we're talking about way into the future.
I would say in the Bahamas, recycling, which is something that is not monitored at all on any kind of official legal capacity, which would make a huge difference, as well as probably more funds given to organizations to be able to monitor. There's, thank God, from the Bahamas National Trust and other organizations that we have now more marine protected areas, but it's like the ocean is huge. How can you be able to monitor every square inch of the sea? I mean, it's impossible. It's so difficult, right? So having funds to be able to, okay, you've made the law to protect X, Y, and Z, but how can you monitor that it's actually being respected?
Absolutely. Thank you. I want to just shift a little bit and ask, in an island setting, imports are important, right? You need a lot of supplies, right? And this is not meant to be political, but just to say, like, we're kind of in a time of uncertain global supply chains, right? And so what is it that the islands, countries in this region, what can they be doing to be more domestically sustainable, to be more resilient, right? Using their own sort of resources and what they have available to them domestically. And maybe Hayden, can I start with you?
Okay, sure. So I think everybody's kind of, panicking and talking about and focusing on all these tariff issues, supply chain issues, the Panama Canal, Trump's issues. But we forget quite easily that just 5 years ago, all of us thought, many people thought it was the end of the world. COVID-19 was devastating. People were dying. But we had similar issues, supply chain issues, price increases, imports slowing down. And we began the process to become resilient. More people started growing their own food. More people started looking, how could we rely less on imports? How could we rely less on issues that may be beyond our control? And unfortunately, we forgot. And the moment COVID-19 became not such a big issue, we slipped quietly back into our old ways. Now, I have been doing research and developing composting practices and techniques for easily the last decade. And I can say to you that I have been privy to tests done locally on local compost that have results that are even on par or beyond what's purchased in these, traditionally called big box stores, the imported fertilizers. Not to give them a beef, but, Miracle Grow. Our locally produced compost, and I have seen the results of lab tests that indicate it is just as good or better than the imported products. So we can safely engage these local practices. There's some of the stuff that comes in, we don't know what's in it. At least we know. But there's also the knock-on effect of producing the compost locally. Rhodesia spoke about some of these, the fact that you have, and even the other folks, the landfill, the site of the landfill, what it looks like. When you go there, the last time I visited our landfill, trucks of organic waste were arriving. I'm pleased that through the Recycle Organics program, the Solid Waste Management Authority and local investors and developers, we are working towards having national scale composting. It's something that we need now to build the awareness, because one of our problems is the supply, even local, of compost. So you go to the store and you think you're going to go buy the local compost and none's available today. What are you left with? The Miracle Grow and the other imported things. So if we're going to push sustainable, resilient practices, we need to put things in place to ensure that when it can be used, it's available to be used. We also have the issue of, as I said, the knock-on benefits of an example, composting, is the reduction of the methane at the landfill. And the knock-on impact from that of less of these fires that may occur at the landfill, all pollutants. You have the impact of creation of jobs and industries from using waste as a resource and not, as you said, Allison, as just simply garbage that goes, it's just gone and you don't want to see it anymore. Education, and then back to Rhodesia's point of separation at source. Separation at source is great. It will be incredibly impactful, but we need to put measures in place to deal with those who don't comply. So I am a huge advocate for education, but I am similarly a huge advocate for enforcement of the laws, enforcement of these practices. And where necessary, if we do not have changes in behavior, we have to have the political and social will to enforce through penalties. Then we will truly see the benefits of all our efforts going forward.
Yeah, and I definitely, great point, Hayden. And then back to the question, when I heard it immediately, I thought of this story that I heard when I was opening Seahorse Park, which is a project that we helped in Eleuthera, which was that Dole, the big company that does all the fruits. Dole originated in the Bahamas, in Eleuthera Island. They were the #1 exporters of pineapples in the world. And, when the head of Dole passed away, it was sold to America, and they changed where everything was produced. But we're so blessed to be placed in countries that have, at least for fruit and vegetables, the ideal climate for avocados, mangoes, bananas, pineapples, and that even adds money into our economies, right? Into Saint Lucia, Grenada, the Bahamas, and is being able to have that exports, but also have local that not need to have those importations. I remember during COVID, I mean, we didn't have beef for like 3 weeks. And we were spearfishing all the time because you're reliant on, at least in the Bahamas, we're very reliant on imports from the United States, right? And as to Allison's point, not to get political, things are a bit, up in the air right now, and it is very expensive. One of my best friends lives on Harbor Island. She has a 4-year-old son, and she goes to the supermarket because Harbor Island is so remote. A bag of grapes is like $25. So then it even goes into the health crisis, when I'm in Eleuthera, there's an incredible organization there called One Eleuthera, run by someone named Kiran, who is an incredible person. And one of the main things they're teaching there is farming, and they have all this land, and they're giving fresh meat and excuse me, you don't grow meat. They're giving fresh vegetables to all the local communities, and that's also a big part of it, right? Is if you as well, to keep things fresh, it's going to be more expensive, right, to have fresh fruits and vegetables. So things that are so easily planted on island we're importing, which seems so backwards, because you want to be hiring the capital and hiring the economy in these islands, and it's a very easy way to do. So raising the next generation, talking about seedlings and composting and all this is so important, because you can get more farmers and more agriculture. And then going back into the arena of legislation, the new head of agriculture, I had a pleasure of meeting him, is so adamant on cutting down importation to the Bahamas so that we're more self-sustainable. And as the world goes on and all the leaders are changing and it's uncertain, I think that's something that's so important, is to be more self-sustainable. And having his legislation changing at the moment is going to make a lasting change. So I think it's like starting from the bottom, seeing why it's important, and going up to the top. And that's my take.
My take is, immediately, Allison, when you asked the question, it brought me back to my childhood. I grew up on a farm. I grew up, if I wanted a fruit, I would go outside and pick that fruit. If I wanted chicken, my grandma would kill that chicken. I grew up going outside to pick the eggs, collect the eggs that I wanted for breakfast that morning. And it's just very important that we eat what we grow, and we grow what we eat, in all the facets of it, whether it's food or protein. We can do it. We have done it. Chips and those other things were delicacies. We had them once a year during the summertime. You get a Cheetos one time for the year. So I think it's time for us to look within as a Caribbean island, look at what we have produced in the past, go back to the past. If we want to introduce technology to help us with the manual labor, I think it's time we look within and go back and do what we used to do, because it worked then, and stop being so lazy about it. And that's all for me. Read that question.
I love this. This is a great conversation, but I do note that we are coming up to time. So I have one last question. This is a great question I think we can wrap up on, from Quincy Augustine. And just looking at time, if we can maybe keep our answers maybe one minute each, so we could do a little wrap up. But this is key. How do we convince our governments to get on board in dealing with environmental issues? This is the key, right?
I'll jump in first. Convince them to not look at it in the context of votes. Convince them they need to look at it strictly in the context of value, results, and outcome, not votes.
And to add to that, it should not be personality based. It should be all the things that Hayden spoke about. Not because you're not aware or interested, that does not mean it does not come to the forefront. It should always be at the forefront.
I think it not a very candid answer is why it benefits them and why it benefits the country and why it brings money into the economy. Because at the end of the day, sustaining an incredible country anywhere in the world has a lot to do with the economy. And, you know, just how we were talking about the import export, that, you know, by them exporting, it's going to help the economy. So basically saying, okay, yes, this is a climate thing, but this is how it's helping the country and you, and it's not, you know, science class, et cetera, et cetera. This is really gonna really help sustainability and in sense the sustainability of our country, of any country.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Thank you so much for this great conversation. This has been really, really fruitful. I hope it was enjoyable for you as well. Maybe just to wrap up, I think I heard sort of three main themes, right, that kind of came up again and again throughout this conversation today. So first is awareness, right? Building awareness is what is like a key fundamental point to behavior change that we need to really see and grow the resilience that we're looking for. Second is engaging the private sector, right? And specifically in the Caribbean, that's the tourism sector, right? Using those resources availability, the resources available for sustainability and resilience. And finally, this last topic that we just talked about, long-term change comes from policy, right? Engaging the government and looking at how do we have that paradigm shift, right? How do we set the expectations, right, through policy and policy change? So again, to the audience, thank you so much for joining us, and to my wonderful guests and panelists here today. I so appreciate your time, your thoughts, and your input. It's been excellent and to have this such an important conversation. I hope you've come away with a deeper understanding of the real on-the-ground efforts happening across the Caribbean to tackle climate change and build stronger, more resilient communities. As a nonprofit, CCAP relies on partnerships, collaboration, and support from people like you to continue driving bold climate solutions forward. If today's session has inspired you, I invite you to explore our work. Come visit our website, our social medias, upcoming events. We'll continue this series, this Rooted Resilience series. So, you know, if you've given us your email, you know, you'll be getting information about that in the coming weeks. And of course, we'd love to keep the conversation going. If you have any more questions, ideas, or want to connect, feel free to reach out to me or any of our incredible experts here directly through their email. We'd also be happy to share more and hear from you. So thanks again, and have a wonderful Earth Month.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.